Have you ever stopped to wonder why so many women around you seem to be losing control? Why their reactions are so intense, their outbursts so frequent, and their decisions so incomprehensible? The answer might lie in the revolutionary discoveries of Carl Jung, one of history's greatest psychologists. Jung uncovered something disturbing about the modern feminine psyche, something society prefers to ignore. He identified hidden forces that are literally driving women insane, creating a silent epidemic of mental imbalance that affects relationships, families, and the entire social structure. What you're about to discover will completely change your perspective on female behavior. Prepare to understand the deep psychological mechanisms that have transformed the contemporary woman into an emotional time bomb. This isn't just theory. It's the key to deciphering the enigma of modern feminine madness, the dark side she's hiding. Every woman carries within her what Carl Jung called the shadow, the repressed, denied, and hidden aspects of her personality that she refuses to acknowledge. But in today's world, this shadow has grown into something monstrous, festering in the depths of her unconscious mind like a cancer that slowly consumes her sanity from within. Jung understood that the shadow isn't just negative traits we don't like about ourselves. It's the raw, primal energy that civilization has forced women to suppress. It's the rage of 1,000 generations of women who had to smile when they wanted to scream, who had to be nice when they wanted to fight, who had to be understanding when they wanted to destroy everything around them. This shadow manifests in ways that most people don't recognize. When a woman suddenly explodes over something trivial, like you leaving a cup on the counter, she's not really angry about the cup. She's releasing decades of accumulated shadow energy that has been building pressure like a volcano ready to erupt. The cup is just the trigger, not the cause. The modern woman's shadow contains her suppressed sexuality, her denied aggression, her forbidden desires for power and dominance. Society has taught her that these aspects are unfeminine, so she pushes them deep into her unconscious. But Jung warned us, whatever we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves doesn't disappear. It grows stronger in the darkness. Watch how women interact in groups, and you'll see the shadow at work. The passive-aggressive comments, the subtle undermining, the fake smiles hiding genuine contempt. These are all manifestations of shadow energy that has nowhere else to go. Because she can't be directly aggressive, that wouldn't be ladylike. Her aggression becomes twisted, indirect, and ultimately more destructive. The shadow also contains her deepest fears about herself. Fear that she's not good enough, not attractive enough, not worthy of love. Fear that she's fundamentally flawed in some way that everyone can see, but no one will tell her. This fear drives her to create elaborate personas, masks she wears to hide what she believes is her true, unlovable self. But here's where it gets truly dangerous. The more she denies her shadow, the more it controls her behavior. Jung called this shadow projection, when we unconsciously attribute our own repressed qualities to others. This is why women often become obsessed with what other women are doing, saying, or wearing. They're not really judging others. They're fighting with aspects of themselves they refuse to own. The shadow also explains why women can be so cruel to each other. The feminine shadow contains what Jung identified as the terrible mother archetype, the destructive, devouring aspect of the feminine principle. When this energy is unconscious and unintegrated, it turns women into each other's worst enemies, competing not just for resources or attention, but for the right to exist without shame. Modern feminism, rather than helping women integrate their shadow, has often made the problem worse by declaring certain aspects of femininity as internalized misogyny. This creates even more shame around natural feminine instincts, driving them deeper into the shadow where they become more toxic and destructive. The digital age has given the feminine shadow new weapons. Social media platforms become battlegrounds where shadow energy is unleashed through anonymous comments, virtue signaling, and public shaming campaigns. The mob mentality we see in online cancel culture is often driven by collective shadow projection, groups of people unconsciously attacking in others what they hate about themselves. Jung believed that until we acknowledge and integrate our shadow, we remain unconscious and at its mercy. For women, this means accepting that they have dark, aggressive, selfish impulses, and that these impulses are not inherently evil or unfeminine. They're simply energy that needs to be consciously directed rather than unconsciously expressed. The price of ignoring the shadow is psychological fragmentation. The woman becomes split between her conscious persona, the mask she shows the world, and her unconscious shadow, the parts she denies. This split creates internal tension that manifests as anxiety, depression, and what appears to be crazy behavior to those who don't understand the psychological dynamics at play. 2. The internal war between reason and instinct. Carl Jung identified one of the most destructive conflicts in the modern woman's psyche, the brutal war between her rational mind and her instinctual nature. This isn't just about logic versus emotion. It's about a fundamental split that's tearing her apart from the inside, creating a level of internal chaos that would drive anyone to the brink of madness. For thousands of years, women operated primarily from their instinctual wisdom. They knew when to nurture, when to protect, when to withdraw. Their bodies were finely tuned instruments that communicated through intuition, cycles, and deep bodily knowing. But modern society has declared war on these instincts, demanding that women operate like defective men, purely rational, disconnected from their natural rhythms, always on and productive. This creates what Jung called a complex, an autonomous part of the psyche that operates independently of conscious control. The woman's instinctual self becomes like a caged animal, pacing back and forth, growing more agitated with each passing day. Meanwhile, her rational mind tries desperately to maintain control, to be logical, to make sense of feelings and urges that don't fit into neat categories. Consider the modern woman's relationship with her menstrual cycle. Her instincts tell her to slow down, turn inward, rest. But her rational mind, trained by a society that values constant productivity, tells her these instincts are weakness, that she should power through, take a pill, and keep performing. This creates a monthly internal war that leaves her feeling crazy, unreliable, and fundamentally broken. The workplace has become a particular battleground for this conflict. A woman's instincts might tell her that her boss is dangerous, that a particular project feels wrong, or that she needs to protect her energy for more important things. But her rational mind, trained to ignore these irrational feelings, overrides these warnings. She pushes forward, ignoring her inner guidance until she finds herself in situations that feel completely wrong, but that she can't logically explain. This internal war is particularly brutal around relationships and sexuality. A woman's instincts are incredibly sophisticated when it comes to evaluating potential partners. She can sense on a cellular level whether a man has good genes, whether he's trustworthy, whether he would be a good father. These instincts have been refined over millions of years of evolution. But modern dating culture demands that she ignore these instincts in favor of rational criteria. Does he have a good job? Is he emotionally available? Does he communicate well? These aren't bad criteria, but when they completely override instinctual knowing, they lead to relationships that look good on paper but feel dead inside. The woman finds herself with partners her mind approved of, but her body rejects. The birth control pill represents one of the most dramatic examples of reason overriding instinct. The pill fundamentally alters a woman's hormonal landscape, changing not just her fertility but her personality, her attraction patterns, and her emotional responses. Her rational mind sees this as liberation, but her instinctual self experiences it as a kind of chemical imprisonment. Women on hormonal birth control often report feeling like strangers to themselves. They make relationship choices they later can't understand, experience emotional reactions that don't feel authentic, and struggle with a sense of disconnection from their own bodies. This isn't just about side effects. It's about the psychological impact of chemically overriding one of the most fundamental aspects of feminine biology. The career versus motherhood dilemma illustrates this war perfectly. A woman's instincts might be screaming at her to have children during her most fertile years, but her rational mind, trained by society's messages about success and independence, pushes her to delay motherhood for career advancement. The internal tension this creates can be excruciating. She might find herself sabotaging her career unconsciously, making decisions that don't make rational sense but serve her deeper instinctual drives. Or she might pursue career success with such intensity that she burns out, her body rebelling against choices her mind has made. Either way, the split between reason and instinct creates suffering. Jung understood that this war couldn't be won by either side. The solution isn't to abandon reason for pure instinct, nor to completely suppress instinctual wisdom in favor of logic. The solution is integration, finding ways to honor both the rational and instinctual aspects of the feminine psyche. But modern society makes this integration nearly impossible. Women are expected to be available 24/7, to ignore their natural rhythms, to suppress their instinctual responses in favor of socially acceptable behavior. They're trained from childhood to distrust their gut feelings, to rationalize away their intuitive knowing, to seek external validation rather than trusting their inner guidance. The result is a generation of women who feel fundamentally disconnected from themselves. They make decisions that don't align with their deeper nature, pursue goals that don't truly fulfill them, and wonder why they feel so empty and confused, despite having everything they thought they wanted. This disconnection from instinct also makes women more vulnerable to manipulation and abuse. When a woman has been trained to ignore her gut feelings, she becomes easy prey for people who mean her harm. Her instincts might be screaming warnings, but her rational mind dismisses these feelings as paranoia or overreaction. The internal war between reason and instinct doesn't just affect individual women, it affects entire families and communities. When women are disconnected from their instinctual wisdom, they can't provide the grounding and intuitive guidance that has traditionally been their contribution to human society. Children grow up without access to this feminine wisdom, and the entire social fabric becomes more fragmented and unstable. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the SIM Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. The void no man can fill. Carl Jung discovered something that terrifies most people. There exists within every woman a profound emptiness that no external relationship, no matter how perfect, can ever satisfy. This isn't romantic pessimism. It's a fundamental truth about the feminine psyche that explains why so many women drive themselves and their partners crazy trying to fill an unfillable void through romantic relationships. Jung identified this as the problem of the animus, the masculine aspect within the feminine psyche that has become disconnected and projected outward onto men. When a woman hasn't developed a healthy relationship with her own inner masculine energy, she unconsciously expects men to provide what she can only give herself. This creates an impossible burden that destroys relationships and leaves both partners feeling frustrated and inadequate. The modern woman often mistakes this inner void for loneliness, convincing herself that the right relationship will make her feel complete. She enters relationships with unconscious expectations that no human being could ever fulfill. She wants her partner to be her father, her son, her best friend, her therapist, her spiritual guide, and her passionate lover all at once. When he inevitably fails to meet these impossible standards, she doesn't recognize the unrealistic nature of her expectations. She concludes that he's deficient or that she needs to find someone better. This void manifests as an insatiable hunger for attention, validation, and emotional intensity. No amount of love, gifts, or devotion ever seems to be enough. The woman finds herself constantly testing her partner, creating drama to see if he'll fight for her, or pushing him away to see if he'll pursue her. These behaviors don't come from malice. They come from a desperate attempt to fill something that feels fundamentally missing. Jung understood that this emptiness is actually a call from the woman's own undeveloped potential. The void represents all the unlived aspects of herself, the parts of her personality that she's never explored, the dreams she's never pursued, the power she's never claimed. Instead of turning inward to develop these aspects of herself, she looks outward to men to provide them for her. The tragedy is that when a man tries to fill this void, he's actually enabling her psychological dependency and preventing her from developing her own wholeness. The kindest thing a man can do is refuse to be responsible for her inner completion. But this feels like rejection to a woman who doesn't understand the psychological dynamics at play. She interprets his healthy boundaries as evidence that he doesn't love her enough. This dynamic becomes particularly destructive in the age of social media and dating apps. The void creates an addiction to romantic novelty, the constant seeking of new connections, new sources of validation, new highs of romantic intensity. Each new relationship begins with the unconscious hope that this person will finally be the one to fill the emptiness, but the pattern inevitably repeats itself. The void also explains why women can become obsessed with their partner's past relationships. It's not just jealousy. It's the unconscious recognition that if previous women couldn't fill his emptiness, and he couldn't fill theirs, then maybe no one can fill anyone's emptiness. This realization is so threatening to the fantasy of romantic completion that it must be avoided at all costs. Jung observed that this inner void is often experienced as a feeling of being fundamentally flawed or unlovable. The woman develops elaborate personas and people-pleasing behaviors to hide what she believes is her true, defective self. She becomes addicted to the feeling of being chosen, pursued, and desired because it temporarily quiets the voice that tells her she's not enough. But here's the cruel irony. The more desperately she seeks to be filled by others, the more empty she becomes. Each failed relationship confirms her unconscious belief that she's unlovable, and each new relationship begins with even more pressure to succeed. The void grows larger with each disappointment, creating a vicious cycle of romantic desperation and inevitable disappointment. The void also manifests as what Jung called possession by the animus. When a woman becomes argumentative, opinionated, and controlling in an unconscious attempt to develop her masculine side through conflict with men. She picks fights not because she enjoys conflict, but because arguing feels like the only way to access her own power and authority. This creates relationships full of drama and tension, where love becomes a battlefield rather than a sanctuary. Modern feminism often misidentifies this void as evidence of patriarchal oppression, suggesting that women feel incomplete because society has denied them opportunities. While external limitations certainly exist, Jung understood that the void is primarily an internal psychological phenomenon that can't be solved through external changes alone. A woman can have every opportunity in the world, and still feel fundamentally empty if she hasn't developed a relationship with her own inner completion. The void also explains the phenomenon of emotional affairs and serial relationships. When the current partner inevitably fails to fill the emptiness, the woman's psyche begins scanning for someone who might succeed where he failed. She doesn't consciously plan to be unfaithful. She's unconsciously seeking the missing piece of herself that she believes must exist somewhere in another person. Perhaps most tragically, this void often leads women to sacrifice their own development in service of romantic relationships. Instead of pursuing their own interests, developing their own skills, or exploring their own potential, they pour all their energy into trying to make relationships work. They become experts on their partner's psychology while remaining strangers to themselves. The solution isn't to give up on relationships, but to recognize that the void can only be filled from within. Jung called this process individuation, the development of a complete, integrated personality that doesn't depend on others for its sense of wholeness. Only when a woman has developed her own inner masculine and feminine qualities can she enter relationships as a complete person, rather than as someone seeking completion through another. When nature demands its price. Carl Jung understood that you cannot fool Mother Nature indefinitely without paying a devastating psychological price. The modern woman's attempt to override her biological programming through sheer willpower and social conditioning has created what Jung would recognize as a collective neurosis, a widespread mental disturbance that manifests as the craziness we see everywhere around us. For millions of years, women's bodies and minds evolved in harmony with natural cycles, seasonal rhythms, and biological imperatives. Their psychological health was intimately connected to their physical cycles, their reproductive capacity, and their role in the continuity of human life. But modern society has declared war on these natural patterns, demanding that women function as if they were machines rather than biological beings with complex hormonal and psychological needs. The most obvious example is the menstrual cycle, which Jung would have recognized as a powerful psychological and spiritual process, not just a biological inconvenience. Each month, a woman's psyche goes through a complete transformation, from the outward-focused energy of ovulation to the inward-turning wisdom of menstruation. This cycle was once honored as sacred, a time when women withdrew from daily activities to access deeper levels of intuition and insight. But modern society treats the menstrual cycle as a malfunction to be medicated away. Women are expected to maintain the same energy, mood, and productivity every day of the month. When their natural rhythms interfere with this artificial consistency, they're told something is wrong with them. They're prescribed hormonal suppressants, antidepressants, and stimulants to force their bodies into compliance with societal demands. The psychological cost of this override is enormous. When a woman fights against her natural cycles, she creates internal tension that manifests as anxiety, depression, and what appears to be irrational behavior. She's literally at war with her own biology, and like any war, it leaves casualties. Her mental health, her relationships, and her sense of self. The delay or avoidance of motherhood represents another area where nature eventually demands its price. Jung understood that archetypal energies, the deep, universal patterns of human experience, don't simply disappear when we ignore them. The maternal archetype exists within every woman, regardless of whether she consciously wants children. When this energy has no outlet, it becomes distorted and potentially destructive. Women who delay motherhood often find themselves becoming hypermaternal toward pets, romantic partners, or causes. They might develop an obsessive need to nurture and control, or conversely, they might become aggressively anti-maternal, developing contempt for motherhood and traditional feminine roles. Both reactions represent the psyche's attempt to deal with unexpressed archetypal energy. The biological clock isn't just about fertility. It's about the entire psychological organization of the feminine psyche. As a woman ages, her unconscious mind becomes increasingly aware that time is running out for certain fundamental life experiences. This creates what Jung would call complex, an autonomous part of the psyche that operates outside conscious control, generating anxiety, depression, and seemingly irrational behavior. Hormonal birth control represents one of the most dramatic examples of nature demanding its price. The pill doesn't just prevent pregnancy, it fundamentally alters brain chemistry, personality, and psychological functioning. Jung would have been fascinated by how this chemical override affects the unconscious mind and the development of neurotic symptoms. Women on hormonal birth control often report feeling emotionally flattened, unable to access the full range of their emotional experience. They describe feeling like spectators to their own lives, present but not fully engaged. This emotional numbing isn't just a side effect. It's the psychological cost of chemically suppressing one of the most fundamental aspects of feminine biology. The pressure to maintain a youthful appearance represents another area where nature eventually collects its debt. Jung understood that each life stage has its own psychological tasks and gifts. When women spend enormous amounts of energy fighting against natural aging, they miss the psychological development that's supposed to occur as they mature. The obsession with youth prevents women from developing what Jung called the wisdom of the second half of life. Instead of becoming elders who guide younger generations, they become desperate competitors trying to maintain relevance through appearance and behavior that's inappropriate for their age. This creates a profound sense of emptiness and meaninglessness that no amount of cosmetic intervention can address. Sleep deprivation, epidemic among modern women, represents another way that ignoring natural rhythms creates psychological disturbance. Jung understood the crucial importance of dreams and sleep for psychological health. When women constantly override their need for rest and recovery, they cut themselves off from the unconscious processes that maintain mental balance. The modern woman's relationship with food often reflects this same pattern of overriding natural signals. Constant dieting, emotional eating, and food restriction represent attempts to control through willpower what should be regulated by natural appetite and satisfaction cues. This creates an obsessive relationship with food that consumes enormous psychological energy and creates cycles of shame and self-hatred. Physical exercise has become another area where women fight against rather than work with their biology. The pressure to maintain a specific body type leads many women to engage in exercise routines that are more punishment than nourishment. They ignore their body's signals for rest, recovery, and gentler movement, creating chronic stress that manifests as both physical and psychological symptoms. Jung would have recognized that the epidemic of autoimmune diseases among women represents the body's rebellion against this constant override of natural signals. When the psyche can't express its distress through conscious channels, it often speaks through physical symptoms. The body becomes the battlefield where the war between natural impulses and social demands plays out. The price that nature demands isn't just individual, it's collective. When women are disconnected from their natural rhythms and biological wisdom, they can't provide the grounding and stability that has traditionally been their contribution to families and communities. Children grow up without access to maternal wisdom that's been refined over millions of years of evolution, and society becomes increasingly chaotic and unstable. The solution isn't to return to some romanticized past, but to find ways to honor biological reality within modern life. This means recognizing that women's psychological health depends on working with, rather than against, their natural patterns and cycles. The social mask, that's suffocating her soul. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to fit into society's expectations. But for the modern woman, This mask has become a psychological prison that's slowly suffocating her authentic self. She's so busy performing the role of the perfect woman that she's forgotten who she actually is underneath all the pretense, creating a disconnect so profound that it drives her to the edge of madness. Jung understood that everyone needs a persona to function in society, but he warned that when the mask becomes too rigid or too distant from our true nature, it creates what he called persona inflation, a condition where we become identified with our role rather than our authentic self. For women today, this inflation has reached epidemic proportions. From childhood, girls are taught that their value lies in being agreeable, accommodating, and attractive. They learn to suppress their natural aggression, their selfish impulses, their messy emotions, and their authentic opinions in favor of being nice. This creates a persona that's so far removed from their true nature that maintaining it requires enormous psychological energy. The modern woman exhausts herself trying to be everything to everyone. She's the supportive girlfriend who never complains, the dedicated employee who always says yes, the perfect mother who never loses her temper, the understanding friend who's always available. She's created a persona so demanding that no human being could possibly maintain it, yet she beats herself up whenever she fails to live up to this impossible standard. Social media has made this persona performance even more destructive. Women now feel pressured to curate not just their public behavior, but their entire lives for online consumption. Every meal, every outfit, every experience must be photographed and presented as evidence of their perfect life. The gap between their online persona and their messy, complicated reality becomes a source of constant anxiety and shame. The pressure to maintain the persona creates what Jung called shadow projection, when the qualities we've suppressed in ourselves are unconsciously attributed to others. Women who have suppressed their own aggression become obsessed with calling out toxic behavior in others. Those who have denied their own selfishness become virtue-signaling machines, constantly demonstrating their moral superiority. This persona maintenance requires constant vigilance. The woman monitors every word, every expression, every impulse to ensure nothing unacceptable slips through. She becomes her own prison warden, policing her thoughts and feelings with ruthless efficiency. The mental energy required for this self-surveillance leaves little capacity for genuine creativity, spontaneity, or joy. The workplace persona is particularly suffocating. Women are expected to be competent but not threatening, confident but not arrogant, ambitious but not aggressive. They must navigate impossible double standards where being too feminine is seen as weakness, but being too masculine is seen as unfeminine. This creates a narrow band of acceptable behavior that feels artificial and constraining. In relationships, the persona becomes a barrier to genuine intimacy. The woman is so focused on being the perfect partner that she never reveals her true self. She agrees when she wants to disagree, smiles when she wants to cry, and accommodates when she wants to assert boundaries. Her partner falls in love with her persona, not her authentic self, creating relationships built on performance rather than genuine connection. The maternal persona is perhaps the most demanding of all. Mothers are expected to be endlessly patient, selflessly devoted, and naturally nurturing. Any expression of frustration, ambivalence, or exhaustion is seen as evidence of maternal failure. Women exhaust themselves trying to live up to an idealized version of motherhood that exists nowhere in reality. Jung recognized that personas become particularly rigid during midlife, when the gap between our authentic self and our social role becomes impossible to ignore. This is why so many women experience what appears to be a breakdown in their 40s and 50s. Their psyche is rebelling against a lifetime of persona maintenance, demanding recognition of their suppressed, authentic self. The persona also explains why women can be so critical of other women who step outside accepted roles. When a woman has sacrificed her authenticity to maintain social acceptability, she unconsciously resents others who seem to be living more freely. This creates the crab bucket mentality where women pull each other down rather than supporting each other's growth. The cost of persona maintenance isn't just individual. It affects entire families. Children who grow up with mothers who are performing rather than being authentic learn that love is conditional on good behavior. They develop their own rigid personas early, perpetuating the cycle of inauthenticity across generations. Breaking free from persona inflation requires what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are rather than who you think you should be. This means disappointing people, setting boundaries, and accepting that you can't be everything to everyone. For women who have built their entire identity around being agreeable, this process feels like psychological death, the vicious cycle of self-destruction. Carl Jung observed that when people cannot consciously confront their psychological conflicts, they unconsciously create situations that force these conflicts into the open. For the modern woman, this manifests as a pattern of self-destruction so subtle and systematic that she often doesn't recognize it as self-sabotage. Instead, she experiences it as a series of unfortunate events, bad luck, or evidence that she's fundamentally flawed. This cycle begins with what Jung called complexes, autonomous parts of the psyche that operate independently of conscious control. When a woman has unresolved psychological conflicts, these complexes begin to influence her behavior in ways that systematically undermine her conscious goals. She wants success, but unconsciously creates failure. She desires love, but unconsciously drives people away. She seeks happiness, but unconsciously creates drama and chaos. The self-destructive pattern often starts with perfectionism, the belief that she must be flawless to be worthy of love and acceptance. This perfectionism creates impossible standards that guarantee failure. But instead of recognizing the unrealistic nature of her expectations, she concludes that her failure proves she's inadequate. This confirmation of her worst fears about herself provides a twisted form of psychological comfort. It's easier to live with known inadequacy than unknown potential. Jung understood that self-destruction often serves a hidden psychological purpose. For many women, creating problems provides a distraction from deeper issues they're not ready to face. It's easier to focus on the drama of a dysfunctional relationship than to confront the emptiness of your life purpose. It's simpler to obsess over weight and appearance than to deal with feelings of powerlessness and meaninglessness. The cycle manifests differently in various life areas. In relationships, she might unconsciously choose partners who are emotionally unavailable, abusive, or commitment-phobic. When these relationships inevitably fail, she doesn't examine her selection criteria. She concludes that she's unlovable or that all men are terrible. This keeps her trapped in the same pattern while avoiding the deeper work of understanding why she's attracted to dysfunction. Career self-sabotage is equally common. She might procrastinate on important projects, pick fights with bosses, or make decisions that limit her advancement. When opportunities arise, she finds reasons why she's not qualified or ready. She might even succeed despite herself, only to unconsciously undermine her achievements through imposter syndrome or self-defeating behavior once she reaches her goals. Financial self-destruction is another common pattern. Despite earning good money, she finds herself constantly broke, making impulsive purchases or getting involved in financially risky situations. Money becomes a weapon she uses against herself, proof that she can't be trusted with resources or success. The financial stress provides a convenient explanation for her unhappiness while avoiding deeper questions about life direction and purpose. The modern woman's relationship with her body often becomes a primary vehicle for self-destruction. Eating disorders, exercise addiction, cosmetic surgery addiction, and self-harm all represent attempts to control internal chaos through external manipulation. The body becomes both the problem and the solution, the source of shame and the potential path to redemption. Social media amplifies these self-destructive tendencies by providing endless opportunities for comparison and self-criticism. She curates her online presence while simultaneously using it as evidence of her inadequacy. Every post becomes an opportunity for self-judgment, every photo a reminder of her flaws, every interaction a chance to feel excluded or misunderstood. Jung recognized that addiction often serves as a form of slow suicide, a way of destroying oneself gradually while maintaining the illusion of living. Modern women might not abuse alcohol or drugs, but they can become addicted to drama, chaos, shopping, social media validation, or toxic relationships. These addictions provide temporary relief from psychological pain while simultaneously creating more problems. The cycle is maintained by what Jung called projection, attributing our own unconscious qualities to others. Instead of recognizing her own self-destructive patterns, she focuses on how others are failing her. Her boss doesn't appreciate her. Her partner doesn't understand her. Her friends don't support her. This external focus prevents her from seeing her own role in creating the very situation she complains about. Self-destruction also serves as a form of control. If she destroys herself before others can reject her, she maintains the illusion of agency. It's better to quit before being fired, to leave before being abandoned, to fail before risking real success. This pseudo-control provides psychological comfort, while ensuring she never has to face her full potential or confront her deepest fears. The cycle is reinforced by what Jung identified as the repetition compulsion, the unconscious tendency to repeat familiar patterns, even when they're destructive. The known misery becomes preferable to unknown possibility. She stays in situations that confirm her negative beliefs about herself because they feel familiar and predictable, even when they're destroying her. Breaking this cycle requires what Jung called holding the tension of opposites, the ability to recognize and accept contradictory impulses without immediately acting on them. This means acknowledging both the desire for growth and the fear of change, both the longing for love and the terror of intimacy, both the wish for success and the comfort of familiar failure. The path out of self-destruction involves developing what Jung called conscious suffering, the willingness to experience psychological pain without immediately seeking escape through destructive behavior. This requires enormous courage because it means facing the very feelings and fears that the self-destructive patterns were designed to avoid. The woman you once called crazy isn't insane. She's a casualty of a society that has declared war on feminine nature itself. Carl Jung's insights expose an uncomfortable truth. We've created a world that systematically destroys women's psychological wholeness, then labels them as unstable when they break under the pressure. Every hysterical outburst, every irrational decision, every moment of apparent madness is actually her psyche's desperate attempt to reclaim what has been stolen from her. The real question isn't why women are going crazy. It's why we continue to pretend that forcing them to deny their deepest nature won't have catastrophic consequences. Jung was right. The shadow always returns to collect its debt. And we're now witnessing the psychological reckoning of an entire gender pushed beyond its breaking point.